The moment you stop trying to control everything around you is the moment you finally become unshakable. Not cold, not distant, just finally free from the exhausting cycle of managing other people's emotions while neglecting your own inner world. Mental strength isn't about becoming harder or building walls so high that nothing touches you. It's about developing a core so solid that when life shakes you, and it will shake you, you don't shatter into 1,000 pieces trying to be everything for everyone. For too long, you've been taught that strength means endurance, that it means saying yes when everything inside you screams no, that it means smoothing over conflict and absorbing tension so others can remain comfortable. But the ancient Stoics understood something profound about human nature that modern psychology is only now catching up to. They knew that true power comes from mastering the one thing you actually control: your inner state, your responses, your choice of where to direct your energy. Think about the last time someone criticized you. Not constructive feedback, but that cutting remark designed to make you small. Your heart probably raced. Your mind immediately started constructing defenses or replaying the moment over and over, dissecting every word, every tone, wondering what you did wrong, how you could have prevented it. This is the trap. You gave away your power the second you allowed someone else's words to dictate your emotional state. The first habit of mental strength is learning to observe your reactions before you become them. When that criticism lands, there's a split second, a tiny gap between the stimulus and your response. Most people never notice this gap because they've trained themselves to react instantly. But in that pause lives your freedom. You can choose to examine the criticism objectively, extract anything useful, and discard the rest without letting it lodge itself in your chest like a splinter you'll feel every time you move. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that we suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about those events. Read that again slowly. Your suffering isn't caused by what happened to you. It's caused by the story you tell yourself about what happened. This distinction is everything. When you internalize this truth, you stop being a victim of circumstance and become the author of your own emotional experience. Before you move past this moment, if you're finding value in this perspective, subscribe to this channel now. We're building a community of women who refuse to play small, and every video goes deeper into these principles that actually change lives. Consider a scene that plays out in countless relationships. You're at dinner with your partner, and he's been on his phone for 20 minutes straight. You feel invisible, unimportant, like you're competing with a screen for attention. The old version of you might have made passive-aggressive comments, sighs loud enough to be heard but deniable enough to avoid direct conflict, or built up resentment that would explode 3 days later about something completely unrelated. The mentally strong version recognizes that his phone usage is not actually about you. His attention or lack thereof doesn't determine your worth. You have 3 choices. You can calmly state your need for connection without accusation. You can redirect your attention to something fulfilling, or you can recognize this is part of a pattern that needs a bigger conversation later. Notice none of these options involve suffering silently or creating drama. They're all rooted in the second habit, accepting that you cannot control other people, only your boundaries and responses. This brings us to the third habit, one that changes everything once you truly embrace it. You must become comfortable with other people being uncomfortable with your boundaries. Women are socialized from birth to be accommodating, to read rooms and adjust themselves accordingly, to be the emotional shock absorbers in every relationship. You've probably spent years trying to prevent negative reactions from others by anticipating their needs and molding yourself to fit them. This is exhausting. More than exhausting, it's self-abandoning. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you laugh at something that actually hurt you, every time you minimize your own needs to keep the peace, you're teaching people that your boundaries are negotiable. The Stoics would tell you that the opinion others hold of you is not your concern. Your concern is living in alignment with your values. When you start prioritizing your inner peace over external approval, some people will be upset. Let them. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility to manage. Here's a second scene. You're in a meeting at work and a male colleague presents your idea as his own. Everyone nods along, praising his insight. Your stomach drops. You feel that familiar mix of anger, betrayal, and helplessness. The fourth habit is learning to separate the emotion from the action required. Yes, you're angry. Anger is information. It's telling you a boundary was crossed. But anger doesn't have to drive your response. A mentally strong woman feels the anger fully, acknowledges it, and then strategically decides how to address the situation. Maybe you speak up immediately with calm clarity. Maybe you address it privately afterward. Maybe you document it and build a case for a pattern of behavior. The point is, you're not suppressed and you're not explosive. You're deliberate. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is the essence of emotional mastery. The fifth habit might surprise you because it sounds counterintuitive. Practice negative visualization. The Stoics regularly imagined losing everything they valued, not to be pessimistic, but to build resilience and gratitude. Spend a few minutes each week imagining challenges you might face. What if you lost your job? What if that relationship ended? What if you faced serious illness? When you mentally rehearse difficulty, two things happen. First, you realize you're more capable of handling hardship than you thought. Your brain starts problem-solving instead of catastrophizing. Second, you stop taking your current circumstances for granted. The life you have right now, with all its imperfections, becomes something you consciously appreciate rather than just endure while waiting for things to get better. The sixth habit is daily reflection, and this is where most people fail, not because they don't understand its value, but because they don't implement it consistently. At the end of each day, spend 10 minutes reviewing your choices. When did you act in alignment with your values? When did you betray yourself? What triggered you, and why? This isn't about judgment or shame. It's about pattern recognition. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Most women walk through life in a reactive fog, responding to stimuli without ever examining why they respond the way they do. Your childhood wounds are running your adult life until you consciously intervene. That sharp reaction when someone questions your competence, that's probably connected to never feeling good enough for a critical parent. The way you overfunction in relationships, that's likely tied to equating your worth with your usefulness. Daily reflection brings these patterns into the light where you can actually work with them. If you're starting to see yourself differently through this lens, take a second to like this video or drop a comment sharing which habit resonates most. Your engagement helps this message reach other women who need to hear it, and I read every single comment. Now let's talk about the seventh habit, one that will immediately elevate how people perceive and treat you. Speak with intention. Every word you say either reinforces your power or gives it away. Notice how often you apologize when you've done nothing wrong. Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? Sorry, I know you're busy, but sorry to bother you. You're preemptively diminishing yourself, signaling that your needs are an imposition. Stop. Ask the question directly. State your need clearly. If you must apologize, make it specific to an actual wrong you committed, not to your existence taking up space. The same goes for qualifiers that undermine your statements. I'm not an expert, but this might be a stupid idea. I could be wrong. However, these phrases train people to dismiss you before you've even finished speaking. Own your perspective. If you're uncertain, say, "I'm still forming my opinion on this," rather than pre-discrediting yourself. The language you use shapes your reality. The eighth habit is building resilience through voluntary discomfort. Mental strength is like a muscle. It atrophies without use. You need to regularly do things that challenge you in small, manageable ways. Have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Try something you might fail at. Sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of immediately reaching for your phone, food, shopping, or whatever your preferred numbing mechanism is. Every time you choose short-term discomfort over long-term avoidance, you prove to yourself that you're capable. This is how you build trust with yourself. Most people don't lack confidence in a general sense. They lack proof. They haven't given themselves evidence that they can handle hard things. So start small. If social anxiety plagues you, Make eye contact with a stranger and smile. If public speaking terrifies you, speak up in a small meeting. These tiny acts of courage compound over time into a fundamentally different self-concept. Here's the third scene. You're scrolling through social media and see someone you know, someone you consider less talented, less dedicated, celebrating a major success that you've been working toward for years. The comparison stings. The unfairness of it feels overwhelming. Why does it come easily to her while you struggle? This moment is a test. The ninth habit is refusing to let comparison steal your peace. Someone else's success is not evidence of your failure. Their timeline is not your timeline. The Stoics understood that envy is a form of self-harm. When you resent someone else's good fortune, you're poisoning your own mind while they remain completely unaffected. Redirect that energy. Let their success remind you what's possible. Let it fuel your motivation without contaminating it with bitterness. This requires constant practice because we're wired to compare, and social media has weaponized that instinct. But every time you catch yourself in that spiral and choose to redirect, you get stronger. The 10th and perhaps most challenging habit is living by your principles rather than seeking validation. This is the culmination of everything we've discussed. You need to get clear on what you actually value, not what you've been told to value, not what looks good to others, but what makes you feel aligned and whole. Then you need to make decisions based on those values even when no one is watching, even when there's no external reward, even when people disapprove. This is integrity. This is character. This is the bedrock of mental strength. When your sense of self comes from within rather than from the shifting opinions of others, you become untouchable in the best possible way. Not because nothing affects you, but because your core remains stable regardless of external turbulence. Let's go deeper into what this actually looks like in practice, because knowing these habits intellectually is different from embodying them. The transformation happens in the implementation. When you start observing that gap between stimulus and response, you'll notice how much of your day you've been spending on autopilot, reacting from old programming. A certain tone of voice triggers you into defensiveness. A certain look makes you feel judged. These are conditioned responses, and they're running your life until you interrupt them. The practice is simple but not easy. When you feel triggered, pause. Literally count to 3 before responding. In that pause, ask yourself, is this reaction serving me? Is this who I want to be? Is this response aligned with my values? Most of the time, the answer is no, and that awareness alone creates space for a different choice. The power transfer that happens when you embrace these habits is profound. Your posture changes. You stop making yourself small. You take up space without aggression or apology. Your voice becomes steadier because you're no longer seeking permission to exist. People notice. Some will be drawn to this energy because it's magnetic when someone is fully inhabiting themselves. Others will be threatened by it because your growth highlights their stagnation, and they were comfortable with you playing small because it made them feel bigger. This is where boundary setting becomes critical. You cannot maintain mental strength while surrounding yourself with people who demand your weakness. Evaluate your relationships honestly. Who in your life celebrates your growth? Who subtly undermines it? Who makes you feel like you have to dim your light to make them comfortable? These assessments aren't about judgment. They're about protection. You're building something valuable, and not everyone deserves access to it. The language shift extends beyond just eliminating apologies and qualifiers. It's about claiming your experience without filtering it through what you think others want to hear. Instead of, I feel like maybe you might not be hearing me, try, I don't feel heard right now. Instead of, I'm probably being too sensitive, but that hurt my feelings. Say, that hurt. The directness will feel uncomfortable at first because you've been trained to cushion everything, to make your needs palatable, to do the emotional labor of preventing negative reactions. But that's not your job. Your job is to communicate clearly and honestly. Their job is to manage their response. Posture and body language matter more than most people realize. When you walk into a room, are you trying to minimize your presence or own it? Do you make yourself smaller in chairs, crossing your legs and arms, protecting your torso? Do you speak from your chest or from your throat? These physical habits both reflect and reinforce your mental state. Start noticing. Stand with your weight evenly distributed. Keep your shoulders back but relaxed. Make eye contact. Let your hands be visible and gestures open. This isn't about being aggressive or masculine. It's about being grounded. You're signaling to yourself and others that you belong in the space you occupy. The emotional work of building mental strength requires you to process things you've been avoiding. Many women carry years of unacknowledged grief, unexpressed anger, unvalidated pain. You learned early that certain emotions were acceptable and others weren't. Sadness might have been okay if it was quiet and didn't last too long. Anger was probably labeled as being difficult or dramatic. So you stuffed it down, plastered on a smile, and kept moving. That stored emotion doesn't disappear. It lives in your body, driving your reactions, creating anxiety and depression, manifesting as physical symptoms. Part of becoming mentally strong is creating space to feel what you've been running from. This might mean therapy, it might mean journaling, it might mean screaming in your car or crying in the shower or whatever allows that energy to move through you instead of staying trapped inside. The practice of negative visualization deserves more exploration because it's often misunderstood as pessimism. It's not. It's preparation and appreciation combined. When you imagine losing your health, you start taking better care of your body now. When you imagine losing a relationship, you stop taking that person for granted and show up more fully. When you imagine professional setbacks, you diversify your skills and build resilience. The Stoics weren't catastrophizing. They were removing the power of fear by looking it directly in the face. Most anxiety comes from avoiding the thought of something bad happening. When you actually sit with the worst-case scenario and realize you would find a way through it, that thing loses its grip on you. You're not tempting fate. You're building confidence in your capacity to handle whatever comes. Daily reflection is where theory meets practice. This is your laboratory. You're running experiments with your own life, testing what works and adjusting what doesn't. Did speaking more directly in that meeting feel empowering, or did it make you anxious? Both can be true simultaneously, and that's important data. Did setting that boundary with your friend strengthen the relationship or create distance? Again, both might be happening. The reflection isn't about getting it perfect. It's about learning from every interaction so you're constantly evolving. Write it down. There's something about putting pen to paper that creates clarity your mind alone can't achieve. Over time, you'll have a record of your growth, proof that you're not the same person you were 6 months ago, evidence that change is possible. Voluntary discomfort is the habit that separates those who talk about growth from those who embody it. It's easy to read about these concepts and feel inspired. It's much harder to actually do the uncomfortable thing when the moment comes. You know what you need to do. You need to have that conversation, end that relationship, change that job, invest in yourself, stop enabling that person, speak up in that situation. But you don't, because it's hard and uncertain and scary. So you stay stuck, telling yourself you'll do it when you feel ready. Here's the truth. You'll never feel ready. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action despite fear. Start building your discomfort tolerance deliberately. Every week, do one thing that scares you even a little bit. The compounding effect of these small acts of bravery will astound you. Within months, you'll be capable of things that currently seem impossible. The comparison trap is particularly insidious in the age of social media, where everyone presents their highlight reel while you're living in your behind-the-scenes footage. You're comparing your rough draft to their final product, your beginning to their middle, your struggle to their success. Of course you feel inadequate, but here's what you're not seeing. Their struggles, their failures, their rejections, their moments of doubt. Success is never linear, and the path that worked for someone else might not be yours. Your only job is to be better than you were yesterday. That's the only comparison that matters. Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you becoming more aligned with your values? If yes, you're winning, even if it doesn't look like conventional success yet. Living by principles sounds abstract until you test it against real decisions. Your principles are your non-negotiables, the lines you won't cross even when crossing them would be easier. Maybe one of your principles is honesty. That means you tell the uncomfortable truth, even when a lie would smooth things over. Maybe one of your principles is self-respect. That means you walk away from situations that require you to betray yourself, even if walking away is lonely or financially costly. Principles are expensive. They cost you opportunities that don't align with them. They cost you relationships that require you to violate them. They cost you approval from people who don't share them. But the price of living without principles is higher. It costs you yourself. It costs you peace. It costs you integrity. Choose accordingly. As we bring this together, understand that mental strength isn't a destination you reach and then maintain effortlessly. It's a practice, a series of choices you make daily, sometimes moment by moment. There will be days when you regress, when old patterns resurface, when you react instead of respond. This is normal. This is human. The difference is that now you'll notice it. You'll catch yourself faster. You'll course correct more quickly. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to be conscious. You're trying to live deliberately rather than reactively. Every single time you choose differently, you're rewiring your brain, creating new neural pathways, becoming someone new. The women who master these habits don't become cold or unfeeling. They become more capable of genuine connection because they're no longer manipulating situations to avoid discomfort. They can be vulnerable without being desperate. They can be strong without being rigid. They hold space for others without losing themselves. This is the synthesis of Stoic wisdom and feminine power, and it's magnetic. When you're grounded in yourself, when your sense of worth comes from within, when you're living in alignment with your values, you naturally attract better circumstances and relationships. Not because you've changed who you fundamentally are, but because you've removed the masks and defenses that were keeping your true self hidden. Your mental strength becomes most apparent not in the easy moments, but in crisis. When everything falls apart, when you face real loss or betrayal or failure, these habits will be what you lean on. The person who has practiced observing her reactions doesn't spiral into panic when something goes wrong. The person who has built resilience through voluntary discomfort doesn't crumble under pressure. The person who lives by principles has a compass when everything else is chaos. This is why the work matters. You're not building mental strength for its own sake. You're building it so you can navigate the inevitable storms of life with grace and come out the other side still yourself. So where do you start? Today. Right now. Pick one habit from what we've discussed and commit to practicing it for the next week. Just one. Maybe it's the 3-second pause before reacting. Maybe it's daily reflection for 10 minutes. Maybe it's speaking without apologies for one day. Start small, start specific, and start now. Because here's what happens when you delay. Nothing. Your life stays exactly as it is. The patterns that frustrate you continue. The relationships that drain you persist. The career that doesn't fulfill you remains unchanged. Growth requires action, and action requires starting even when you don't feel ready. This journey of building mental strength will challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself. It will ask you to question beliefs you've held since childhood. It will require you to disappoint people who prefer the old version of you. It will demand that you get uncomfortable repeatedly. And it will be worth every difficult moment, because on the other side is a version of you who is free. Free from the tyranny of other people's opinions. Free from the exhaustion of people-pleasing. Free from the anxiety of trying to control things you can't. Free to be fully, unapologetically yourself. If you're ready to continue this transformation, subscribe to this channel right now because we're just getting started. Every video builds on these foundations, giving you practical tools and deeper insights into living with Stoic principles in a modern world. The next video waiting for you explores how to maintain your inner peace when everyone around you is chaos, and you won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one, where we go even deeper into the practices that change everything.